Hello and welcome to Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo, Embracing Student Choice. My name is Bryan. I am a third grade teacher at Shuford Elementary, and I am here to share with you everything that I know about student choice and how some easy ways that you can implement in your classroom. So if you see down here at the bottom, you see a bit.ly that will bring you to this presentation, as well as a QR code. You can pause it and scan it so that way you can have our presentation too. So let's start with, what choices do you give your students in your classroom? So you can pause this video and click right here, and it'll take you to a Padlet. And I just want you to tell me what kind of choices that you already give your students in your classrooms, and then you can kind of see what other people give to get some more ideas. So one way that I give choices in my classroom is choices that are based off of my students' interests. So there's a lot of different ways that you can get to know your student interests. One way that I do this is by building learner profiles. So I do this in two different ways. So one, I have my students build a learner profile of their own. I have a digital data notebook that all of my students have in their Google Classroom. There's slides, and one of the slides is a learner profile. So within there, it asks questions about their family, about their favorite colors, books, music, sports, a whole list of favorites. And then also ways that they learn best, such as maybe they learn best in a small group, or maybe they learn best by themselves, or maybe they don't know that yet. Maybe the teachers never asked them. And so through that, I have conversations with them, and we think about, okay, what does that look like for you? How are you learning best? And maybe in the beginning of the year, they don't know, but I let my students constantly go back to that learner profile in order to update it. So once they do figure it out, I'm like, hey, go add that to your learner profile. So that way they have it in there. So that's a constant reminder for them. But it's also an easy way for me to go back into it. And I can go and look and say, oh, this student is saying this is how they learn best. And so I help them facilitate that within my classroom. But so not only do I have the students build learner profiles, but I also build learner profiles on them. So over the years, I've done this many different ways. I have just written it on a piece of paper. I've had a notebook that just had all my students' names at the top, and I just took notes along the way as I learned things about them. I have done this in Google Docs or Google Slides, but my favorite way currently is Google Keep. And so what I did was on Google Keep, I just made like one of their sticky notes for each of my students. And as I was talking to them, as I'm building those relationships and having those conversations with my students, I would just add that information in there. I personally like Google Keep easier because I was able to add a widget to my phone. So it's really easy for me to access and pull up on my phone instead of, oh, I talked to a kid at recess and now I have to remember to put it in my notebook that's in my classroom. But whatever actually works best for you, it's just a matter of knowing those students, because it's really hard to hold all of that information that we know about kids in our head. So it's easier that way if you have it written down, that you can quickly refer back to those learner profiles while you are trying to give student choices. So like I mentioned, I help build those learner profiles by building those relationships with my students. I am constantly talking to my students. I greet my students in the morning. I have conversations with them at recess, at lunch, in between as we're transitioning, at the beginning of my small groups. If a kid wants to tell me a quick story, I let them at the end of small group, we got everything done. All right, you can tell me that story, because I want to know about them, and that helps build that relationship between us. That way they are more engaged later and they are more invested in what I have to say to them. But then it also helps me learn more about them, so that way I can give them more choices within the classroom. Another thing that you can do is try to keep up with the newest video game or movie or TV show or whatever it is. Try to keep up with it. And if you can't keep up with it, because I know I can't, have the kids tell you about it. I know I have this one kid who's obsessed with scary movies, and I do not like scary movies, but I just let him tell me about it. And so me and him would talk about scary movies all the time, and he would be teaching me something, and he absolutely loved that because he knew more than I did, and that empowered him in that way. But it was also me talking to him about his interests. And then I gained knowledge. So that way I am able to tie in that newest video game, whether it's just saying so-and-so played Fortnite for 58 minutes one night, that gets them interested and that gets them excited about that word problem because it talks about Fortnite, or even in the middle of your lesson. I don't know, like been reading about something, being able to tie it into something that they are currently doing, or the newest video games, or that movie that they've all seen, is really awesome. And seeing them be like, oh, you actually know about this is really awesome too. Or them being able to tell you about it and you learning from them. So those are just some great ways that you can learn about their interests. One other way is through student surveys. So I will send out Google Form surveys all the time to my students, just asking their opinion. One of my students' favorite thing that I do is I let them choose our read aloud. So I will choose like 4 or 5 books that I think they may be interested in. We'll read the back covers, and then we'll do a Google Form poll, and they can all watch the results live. And then they are more engaged in that read aloud because they were able to choose it, because they wanted to read that story. So just simple things like that is easy to just ask their opinion, just survey them. And if you don't want to do a Google Form, I've done just simple sticky notes. Go rip a paper up and everybody turns in a paper. But those are just some quick and simple ways that you are able to learn their interest in order to bring that into the classroom. So one of the easiest ways that I have found to give student choice is in their journal topics. I do not know about you, but I do not like to come up with journal topics for my students every single day or every single week. That is not something that I find fun. And so what better way to give those students responsibility and empower them with a choice is by letting them choose. So what me and my team do is we come up with a list of prompts. So these prompts could be based off of the unit of writing that we're doing. So like say we're doing opinion writing this month or these couple of months or weeks or whatever it is, then we give them a list of journal prompts that they get to choose from. And so they choose what they are interested in. So they're already engaged in it. And 2, they want to do a really good job because they chose that topic. So the students are definitely more empowered and more engaged in their writing when they get to make that choice. And so I also may give them a choice if maybe we're reviewing some of our units or something. I give them a choice of what kind of writing. So maybe they want to do narrative writing or an opinion writing, or we did a whole Harry Potter unit. So they had a chance to choose that Harry Potter writing, and just giving them those choices as simple as what are you writing about gets them so much more engaged, and it keeps them wanting to write and wanting to write well. And it's just definitely changed what my students turn in their writing because I have given them those choices. Another thing that I like to give my students choices based off of their interest is the early finisher boards. So I don't have all my students doing the same thing once they finish their pathway work for that topic. So they get to make that choice of what they want to do. So I've created these choices based off of their interest, but also things that I know will enrich them in different areas. So I've added Dreamscape and Prodigy and different buckets because I know my kids love those games. So that's one thing I know they're interested in is those games, but I also know that I can assign them to certain standards, or I know what standards they're practicing. So it's still having them review those standards and they're aligned to what we're teaching, but they're doing it in a fun way. Some other things I really like to have on my early finisher boards are logic puzzles or math puzzles. I know as a kid, I personally love to do that, and I do these with my kids all the time. This past year, my kids got really into them, and I love just to see them thinking outside of the box and thinking in different ways, giving them little picture puzzles and them trying to come up with a word, or giving them the Wordle and they're using different strategies to come up with the wordle for the day. And it's just really awesome to see them think through those different puzzles in just different ways. And they enjoy it because it's not the same old, same old. I know my kids love Dreamscape and Prodigy, but they also get tired of it. That is not something they want to do every single day. Even with that as an option on there, they don't choose that every day because they get tired of playing it too. So they like to have that choice of what they can do. Some other things is just Epic. My kids love to go get on Epic. Another one that my kids love to do is Duolingo. They really enjoy learning a different language. And so this past year, we had a student that came in and he only spoke Spanish. So my kids were really excited that they could go on Duolingo and try to learn some Spanish words and some phrases in order to talk to him better. And so they were engaged in that, and it enriched them because they were just so excited to try to communicate with somebody who spoke a different language and try to take down that barrier because they wanted to be friends with them. I also have some coding stuff that I've included on there and some STEM challenges I just come up with just to get students thinking outside the box, but also so that they can collaborate and talk to their friends and work together in order to solve those challenges. So definitely giving them that choice keeps them engaged in something that is enriching standards, is enriching them, enriching their thinking after they have finished their core pathway for that topic. And so I don't have kids bothering other kids who aren't finished. They're engaged in what they're doing after they're done. And I know it's quality work that keeps enriching them. So another way I give students choice is by their interest, is by letting them choose their activities while they're all working on the same standard. So this first one over here is our main idea choice board. So we sat down as a team and we thought, okay, what do most of our kids, what are they mostly interested in? And we came up with these 3 topics: baseball, animal shelters, and astronauts. And we knew that everyone in our class, or pretty much everyone in our classes, would be interested in one of those topics. So we let them choose their topics, and then they were able to work through some different activities that still told me if they understood main idea and if they understood key details and writing a summary, but they were all doing it in a different way. So some may have been doing a flip grid, some may have been doing a seesaw or a common lit, or some may have just been writing. But even though they were all different activities and they were about different topics, they all showed me that they mastered, or if they did not master that standard. So they don't all have to be doing the same thing or reading the same story in order to show you that they have mastered that topic. And so giving them that choice definitely keeps them more engaged because they want to be reading about baseball or they want to be reading about animal shelters. So that way they are more interested in that topic and engaged in that topic, and they're more likely to do better on that assessment at the end because they got those choices. So over here's a snippet of our pathway. And so this was about RL3. So you can see for each different level of our pathway, we gave students a choice of what books they wanted to read, and then also how they created their final project. So they were able to choose from creating Google Slides, a Flipgrid, or a poster, but they all still had to have these same requirements. So everybody's project ended up being a little bit different because we gave them such an open-ended assignment with just, okay, these 3 things just have to be on there, and however way you want to show that. So maybe on their poster, they wanted to draw how the characters' feelings change throughout the story, whereas maybe somebody wanted to write it. And that was okay as long as they were all represented on their final project. So giving them those choices in 1, what stories they want to read, and 2, how they're going to create that assignment definitely empowers them and keeps them engaged because they are deciding this is what I want to do, and they do really well with it. My students this past year absolutely love doing these kinds of final projects and then presenting them to the class. They wanted to show off what they did, which ties right into another topic I'm going to talk about in a second. So another way is through hyperdocs, and on these hyperdocs, they have different choices. So one, they have a choice of their own pacing. So they're able to go at their own pace in order to get it all completed, because we know that some students need more support while some students need less support. Also, there's different choices within it. So maybe these students, such as this one on our science and social studies hyperdoc, this is how we laid those out. But maybe they wanted to watch a video instead of reading an article about it, or maybe they wanted to listen to a podcast, and we give them those choices. So all of those sources have the same information, the same kinds of information. They're going to be able to master the same standard through it, but they're learning it in a different way, and they have that choice. Again, they're able to choose which one they want to watch. Some of my kids enjoy vocabularies, or some of my kids just like to watch brain pops. They're not into the songs. And so we let them choose that way. And again, we let them choose their final project. This one was, you can either make a rap or you can make a movie. And they really like those choices there. This is our language, an example of a language, a part of a language hyperdoc that we did about nouns. And so everybody watched the same thing. They all got the same content, but then they got to choose how they showed off what they knew. So maybe they wanted to do Google Slides or a Nearpod or this IXL, but either way, they were all showing me that they have mastered this, but just showing me in different ways based off of their interests. So that way they are more engaged and they're more excited about it. So another way is through the show what you know, like I was saying just a few minutes ago, is our students really got into this showing what you know. They wanted to stand up and they wanted to present to the class and they wanted to tell everything that they learned, which I thought was so awesome because they worked really hard and they were that much more engaged with it because of these choices that we were giving them. So over here, this was at the end of our Genius Hour PBL, but we use a template like this quite often where we let them choose their final project. This one has a few more options. They're able to choose a board game or a podcast, a Google Slides, a writing, or a news report, where they are creating those things based off of what they're most interested in. And again, this is another example of a checklist of these are the things that you have to have in your presentation, but you are open-ended. You get to choose how you want to present that to the class. And then they present it to the class and they're so engaged, and the presentations are always so awesome because they worked really hard. They chose their topic that they were interested in. They got to choose how they wanted to present the information. So that kept them engaged and empowered in their learning as they are creating these final projects. So another way is through flexible seating. Flexible seating can be as simple as let them sit on the floor. Do they want to sit at their desk today and work? Fine, go do it. Or it can get more complex. So I'm very fortunate that I have won some grants so that I've been able to have a lot of different flexible seating within my classroom. So I have these lap desks, and I have some surf seats that aren't pictured. Some students can grab, and if they like to sit on the floor, they can choose those. That way they can have all their stuff there. And if you walk into my room this past year, 50% of my kids were always on the floor. My kids just love the option to be able to sit on the floor, to be able to spread out on the floor, even just to lay down and do their work. They absolutely enjoy sitting on the floor, and that's such an easy thing that you can do. Another easy one is to take the legs off your table. So this round table down here, I just took the legs off so that was a low table. So I have some carpet squares. There's the yoga ball that this student brought over to the table that they're able to sit on while they're working down there, or they can just sit on the floor while they're working at a lower table. And my students really enjoyed that. Another easy one is like a crate seat, so some cushions, some wobble stools. I have this bar table back here with some bar stools. And I have whiteboard tables that I was able to get through a grant that my students absolutely love to write on them, show their work on their whiteboard table. Rolly chairs. One of my new favorites this year that I bought are these little things out here. So they go on the bottom of a normal chair. and it turns that chair into a wobble chair essentially. So they're able to bounce up and down. They can move side to side. I just found them on Amazon. My kids call them plunger seats because whenever you put them on, they kind of look like plungers, but when you bounce up and down, they make a plungery sound too. And so they absolutely love that. They thought it was hysterical. We have plunger seats in our room and they told everybody. But they really like that because they're able to move and get their wiggles out instead of just sitting still. The way I've set this up in my classroom is I only assign seats to my students because I know I personally hate sitting in one spot all day long in an uncomfortable chair. So I let my kids move around my room all day. So as they're working, if they're in one seat, but then they start to get uncomfortable, they're able to get up and move and go sit somewhere else. And my kids do really well with this. I just set out the expectations of wherever you're sitting, you need to make sure you're making good choices. And that's why I refer back to that learner profile in there in the notebooks of, okay, you said that you work really well by yourself. So where's a good choice that you can sit by yourself and get your work done and then move back with your friends? Or you said you work really well while you're in a wobble stool or sitting on the floor. And so just having them think about that and setting those expectations, they do a really good job of able to move around throughout the whole entire day and just giving them that choice and how and where they're going to learn. They definitely love it and they get more work done, even because who likes to sit quietly in one spot and not talk to their friends? I know I can sit and talk to my friends a little bit and then get some work done too. And so can they, as long as you're guiding them and you're setting out those expectations. And they definitely do a great job with them, and it definitely keeps them engaged in their work because they are more comfortable and they want to be sitting in that spot. So another way that you can give students choice is by standards. So there are some different ways that I help students track their standards and that I track standards. So the biggest way is my digital data notebook. So in my digital data notebook, I have students track their pre and post assessments for their standards. I have students track in a learning roadmap whether they have mastered the standard or not mastered it, and then like what pieces of that standard they need more help with. We track our quarterly scores. We track pretty much any kind of data we put in there because it is so empowering for students to know their data. They're not going to be able to make good choices by what standards they need if they don't know that data. And it is so amazing to sit and have conversations with students about their data because they understand it and they're like, yeah, this is what I need and this is how I can get here. And it encourages them and they get more excited because they're like, oh, yes, I've mastered this standard. Look at how many more I have to go. And then even if they started out not so good on that standard, then they can say, oh, they can see their growth within it. And so it is so empowering to tell students their data. And their notebooks is such an easy way for them to track that. And I personally love data notebooks. So another time, another place, if you need help with data notebooks, you let me know and I am here to help you. So just letting those students know their data by their standards in that data notebook. Also, like I said, tracking that pre and post assessment, whether it is just having those conversations, giving it back their pre-assessment and having conversations with them, and then showing them their post-assessment at the end and having them compare them. Even if you don't have some kind of data notebook set up, you can still have those conversations with those students. You can still show them their scores so they can kind of see like, yeah, like this is where I'm at and this is where I need to be, or look at all this growth I've made, and just have those data. Make sure that you are talking with them and saying like, yeah, this is where you're at, but letting them talk too, because they ultimately are the ones who know what they know. And it's so amazing. There are sometimes that I'll be talking to a student and I'll be like, you totally got this. And they're like, no, I don't, Miss Bryan. I don't understand that at all. And so it's really awesome to have them advocate for themselves and say, this is what I need help with. I don't get it. Even though I've seen something different, most of the time it's just like confidence in that moment, because I've seen that they are able to do it. And so just talking them through that is just really amazing. And then also giving feedback on their assignments. If they're just turning it in and you're putting a grade in and then you're just putting it to the side, that's not helping them because they don't know how they're doing. They don't know if where they can improve, where they need more help with, which piece of that standard are they missing. So making sure that you're giving that feedback to your students, that way they know where they can grow. So some ways that we can do this. The first way is through a reading response. One, giving them choices in how they want to do their reading response. My students personally only have 20 minutes of homework, 20 minutes of reading for homework every night. So they don't do a reading response at home. Whenever they come into the classroom the next day, they are able to choose then. So my students will make these choices based off of their interests, and maybe they like to draw or they like to read comics. So maybe they're going to choose to draw this comic strip, but also based off of the standards that they need more practice. So all 12 of these activities are standards based. I sat with my team and we came up with things that would hit the different standards as well as different interests. And so my students know that they can choose by interest or by what they need that extra help with, because they know that if they're not quite mastering something, but they're doing these reading responses on that standard and they're showing mastery through that, like that's another way they can show mastery of that standard. So that way we can check that off in their data notebook. So this is an easy way. Instead of me telling them exactly what to do for their reading response, it gets them more engaged in it because they are doing something that they, one, know they need more help with, or two, that they are interested in, and they get excited for that reading response. Another way is through a standards review choice boards. And so we call this our WIN, which stands for whatever I need. So what my students do, so this is an example of a math one and an ELA one. And so what they do is we have all of their names over here on the side. This year I co-taught, so it was both of our classes over here. And so what they do is they will move their name to the activity that they choose. So when they're choosing these activities, they're thinking back to what standards do I need more help with, and also what am I interested in. So when we are creating these, we're thinking about, okay, what standards do most of our kids need that extra practice with? And we're making sure we're hitting that in this review. And then we're also thinking about, okay, what is going to keep them engaged? And so we knew our kids loved Blicket this year. So we always had a Blicket on our wins, as well as our kids love to play board games with each other. They love to collaborate and they did a really good job with it. So I always made sure that they were included on our wins as well. That way they had a chance to talk with a partner and work with a partner. I always try to do 50% with a partner and 50% by yourself, because I know just as much as some students love working with a partner every single day, some students like to work by themselves. And so I try to have that equal balance of collaboration in there, as well as that balance for students who don't enjoy that. So instead of having like a spiral review section on our pathway where students just were told what standard to go review, they get to make that choice. So they had a win every single day. They would move their name to a different activity every single day. And what I did to make sure that my students were really thinking about it and not just saying, oh, my best friend's playing that board game, I'm gonna go play with them, I had them justify. So I had them tell me, okay, why did you choose that one today? And they're able to tell me, well, I needed more help on this standard, or I know this student needed extra practice, and I knew that me teaching them and talking them through that standard with it would help me too. So I was helping two people at once. And then I also have on the side here these Netflix of resources. And that's just something that I created. So that way, if that student really is struggling with that standard and really has no clue, they're able to go to that Netflix of resource. And in there, I have anchor charts, I have videos, I have some different activities that they could practice with as just a resource. That way, because I'm not going to be able to always pull them and help them because I'll be having my small groups, they have a way to go get that information and go relearn it, as well as their friends in the classroom too. I am always here. if they want to collaborate and one student wants to help and they're explaining, because that definitely helps. But so that is just one major way I let students choose what standards they're reviewing. And it definitely keeps them empowered in their learning. Another way that I let them review their standard or get a choice by their standards is by letting them sign up for small groups. So I've done this many ways, and I change it up all the time. So one way I've done this is with math. I've let them choose, okay, what small group are you needing by overall standard? So I look at some different standards that a lot of my kids need help with, and I let them choose a standard, and that's going to be their math small group for the day. Or maybe I want to break it up by learning targets, and that's this example over here on this Google form. So thinking about RL3, there's a ton of learning targets. So instead of just saying, oh, you need help with RL3, let's get more specific. And we look into those learning targets, and I'll let them tell me which ones they need more help with. And so then they sign up for that, and I either pull them at the end of my guided reading groups, we go over it, I incorporate into our guided reading groups. I'm also very fortunate to have a 45-minute intervention time built into my day. So I'll also pull these small groups and help them with what they've signed up for them. I'll let them sign up. Maybe if I'm doing like standard review for my morning work, I'll let them choose. I'll let them say, okay, what standards do you need help with? I'll let them sign up for that as well. And again, this takes practice with students to be able to make good choices. But if those students are knowing their data and you're holding them to those expectations and you're having those data talks with them and saying, okay, why did you make this choice? They really do surprise you, and they are able to make those choices for them. And sometimes you'll have that student who you're like, you really need this piece, but they signed up for a different piece. And so that's when I would pull a student back and say, okay, why did you sign up for it? And if that student is able to give me a good explanation and say, okay, well, this is what I see in my data, and this is what I personally know about myself, then I'll let them stay in that group. Yes, I am going to pull them at a different time to do that other standard that they need more help with, or that other piece they need more help with. But if I pull them out of that group and I took that choice away when everybody else had a choice, they automatically are going to shut down. They're already going to be upset that they're in that group. They're already not going to be engaged because that's not what they want to be learning. But when they have their choice of what small group they're doing, and they have that choice of what piece, the learning target of the standard that they're learning, they are so engaged because that is what they chose. That is what they want to be. That's what they know they need to be learning. So definitely whenever you're giving them those different standards, once they know what they need more help with, they are going to be excited to learn that, because every kid wants to learn. They want to know more. They want to do their best. And if you're making sure that they know their data, then they are going to make sure that their data looks the best that it can. So now it is your turn. You are able, I provide these 4 different templates. So you can click on these links and create some different resources for your own classroom. So as you're making these, if you have any kinds of questions, or if you need extra help, or if there was a template maybe there that I talked about but I didn't provide, just let me know. You can email me. I'm also on Twitter, and I'll get back with you, and I will help you and answer any questions in any way that I can. Thank you very much.